If you can communicate with yourself effectively, you're going to be able to communicate with everybody outside of you effectively. If you have a strong, healthy relationship with yourself, you're going to have strong, healthy relationships outside of yourself.
Hello, I'm Chanaye Jackson, and welcome to the Idea to Empire podcast. I cannot wait for you to hear from a good friend of mine, Anna Marie Burdette. She is from DragonFly Rose, and she is at a core a healer, a writer, an artist, and a photographer. She's in transition away from graphic design and into herbalism and writing. And as a photographer, doing event, behind the scenes, and wedding photography. She's based out of Maine. Without further ado, let's talk to Anna Marie. Welcome to the podcast. I gave the audience just like a small, short, tiny snippet about you. I mean, you're transitioning from graphic design to more photography and herbalism. And also, let's fold in a little bit, where you're from. Where's your origin? What's your origin story?
Oh, goodness. My origin story, that is a long one. So I'm a little bit from everywhere. Born in California, childhood in Colorado, teens and 20s in Seattle area. And when I was in Seattle, I became a massage therapist, and that was my career for 11 years. And my son and I traveled down the coast, and I had some really interesting jobs and lived in some very interesting places and some not so nice places. And I found myself in Maine. And one thing that I've always tried to keep in mind with a career is this is the area of my life that I'm going to spend the bulk of my life. What is it? 95% of our life is whatever our chosen work is. And I could never wrap my mind around the idea of staying at a job just to have a steady paycheck and benefits, and you hate it. Because then that in turn means you hate the bulk of your life. And that has just never been okay with me. And so I've tried many different types of jobs. In the end, I found that working for myself is what worked best. We kind of have to try on shoes, you try on shoes, see what fits the best to see what works for you. And I really do work careers in that same way. So I tried. I was like, okay, let's try and do the graphic design route because I know these programs, I know this world. And one of the things that I was facing, especially here in Maine, is nobody wants to pay for it. They either want it for free or they want it really cheap, or they're like, oh, I'm going to do it myself. And there's a lot of programs out today that you can do it by yourself easily. And so it kind of left me in a space. I've been doing photography since I was in high school. I like to think of myself, I'm an old school photographer, because for me, taking the image is just one very small part of being a photographer. And I discovered, talking about niching yourself down, which I've always hated. I've always hated that idea, oh, you got a niche. And I'm like, or niche. I don't know how people say it, but
same to me.
Yeah, potato. Which is funny. I don't know anybody who says potato, but But the second I do it, it's just like with massage therapy. I niche down into that one category, and things sailed for me. And now that I've made the decision that I love event photography, I love it. Weddings, especially. I did my first wedding a year and a half ago, and I blend in. I'm enjoying all the love and the atmosphere and catching people's emotions, and it's just a beautiful day. And I love it. And I get to relive it whenever I go through and I edit the photos. And so it's just a lot of joy and a lot of love. And that's really what I'm about and what I want for people. Yeah. So that's kind of how I came to where I'm at now. And in terms of herbalism, I have always had an affinity for nature, a kinship. I understand plants, and I understand what they can do for our bodies. And I have made countless tinctures and salves and healing tonics and blends for, friends and family. And they're just like, oh my gosh, you need to sell this stuff. Um, and so that's kind of the path that I'm trying to forge. And so I'm choosing paths that bring me intense joy, passion, and like a sense of well-being. And I just finished making a mental health coloring book. And so it's like a coloring page and then a journal prompt to help you deeply connect to who you are. And so I kind of have a lot of things going on, but every single one of them brings me a lot of happiness and joy and peace.
The reason why I wanted to bring you on is because I really feel like your work, and as I've known you, has been really around creating joy. And like, so even though you're going through a pivot and a change is maybe fair to say, it still seems that like the concentration on finding happiness, finding joy, finding purpose in all of those things, enjoying the ride, if you will. So I guess my first question is when you think about business owners and where they are as they build their businesses, especially if they're frustrated and overwhelmed, what's a thought or a piece of advice that you would
Yeah.
give getting through that?
What I have come to find is when you are completely happy and at peace with yourself and you love everything about you, you tend to move through the world in a different way. I have chosen, so our emotions are fluid, like water, and we can choose to latch onto them, but they're just going to drag us around. But you can choose one of them to choose like as your foundation. And I just one day I was like, you know what? I'm choosing happiness as my foundation. So even if I'm frustrated, angry, sad, life is falling apart, I have that strong foundation of happiness. So I can take a breath when things are getting really rough and frustrating or tasks that I have to do that are just like, oh, no one wants to file, no one wants to do data entry for their business, no one wants to do that grunt work. And so by just having those spaces where you can just breathe and focus and look around and be grateful for everything you have and have that like underlying emotion. So somebody, it might be love, somebody, it might be passion. Somebody might choose sadness as their foundation. I don't know. But when you have that strong foundation and then you have your pillars of like your values and your ethics, and you really know yourself, you can navigate through anything. And that in anything in life, and business is a big, huge one that will be easier to navigate through if you are strong within yourself. And when you do know yourself, you'll know what you need to do. So, like for me, if I find myself getting really frustrated or losing passion, I know I need to take a breath. I need to step away. I need to do something else, maybe something creative for a few minutes. Turn on some music and dance. Like watch funny cat videos on YouTube. Something to get me out of my rut. So I have a tool belt of things that I use to help me no matter what's going on in my life. I have something that's going to fit for when I need to take a breath.
I love that analogy of a tool belt. I
Yeah.
mean, when we run our businesses, we're using a lot of tools
Oh
to
yeah.
execute, right? But then we also need to have a lot of tools to execute on ourselves so that we
Yeah.
can show up for our businesses and show up for our families and our friends and, people that people and things, right? I have a dog that I love
Yeah.
to death, so I can show up for my rowdy 2.5-year-old dog, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, and the tools directly correlate to the business world as well.
Yeah.
It's not, if you're a boss, you you're navigating from a space of like, yourself, you have healthy boundaries, you know how to speak to people, you know how to communicate. Communication is, if you can, I always say, if you can communicate with yourself effectively, you're going to be able to communicate with everybody outside of you
Right.
effectively.
Right.
And if you have a strong, healthy relationship with yourself, you're going to have strong, healthy relationships outside of yourself because you have those boundaries in place and like, hey, I deserve better than that. I'm not going to be treated like that. And that's going to trickle down.
Mm.
And they're going to hire people who are in the same mindset because like really does attract like, but you can also help transform. Uh, so if you have a leader who is of that mindset and he's trickling that down, then it's going to transform down the tree of employees, so to
Yeah, I
speak. Yeah.
you're creating a culture.
Yeah. It's like a thriving culture rather than and it's more like a business community, I guess, if you think about it, or family,
Mhm.
where people can be healthy and stable and be taken care of. I think a lot of times people feel like they are not heard.
Mhm.
And if you're coming from a space where you have great communication and you can listen, all those tools directly correlate to business.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps circling back to what tools do you have in your tool belt? So what other ways can a business owner really, or an entrepreneur even, right,
Yeah.
really make sure they're okay?
I always talk about the pivot, being able to pivot. If something's not working, if it's not feeling right, no matter how much time and effort you put into it, sometimes it just doesn't work out. And you either need to pivot it in a completely different direction, or, you're not a tree, move, pivot yourself. Um, I like the graphic design. I've tried and tried, and, could I have tried harder? Yes. Could I have done different things? Yes. But the passion wasn't behind it for me to do those things. And I had to be honest with myself. So I guess that would be one piece of advice is to be honest with yourself
Mm.
and to really look at the situation honestly and say, is this really working? And if
Mm.
it's not, having that strength within yourself to put it aside, think about what would bring you passion, what could you do career wise that would have the passion behind it that would keep you pushing forward.
Sure.
Because just because you're good at something, if you don't have that passion behind it, it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Big
I love
one.
that you made a statement, just a minute ago, and you said, "You're not a tree. Pivot."
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
I just
Yeah.
like, that just really, that just, like, really, like, resounded with my spirit. Like, you're not a
Yeah.
tree. We're not stationary, and, the goal for this life is for you to continue to find things that really light you up, and, like, I consider myself, and it sounds like you are the same, a multi-potentiate, right? And what that means is
Yeah.
that a person is able to be so good at multiple things, but just because you're good at that doesn't mean that
Yeah.
it's for you. And that's exactly what I'm hearing, right? Like, we
Yeah.
can be Jills of all trades, Jacks of all trades, but, like,
Hmm.
what's the thing or the things
Exactly.
that really make us excited? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's something too is everyone's like, oh, well, how do you find your purpose? Well, it's where your passion is.
Mhm.
Like you said, we may be good at all these things, but what are we passionate about? And that passion is what our purpose is. Because
Yeah.
if it wasn't, like if that passion wasn't there, it's not for us.
Yeah.
And when you brought up the analogy of the tree again, it reminded me of a poem that I wrote on my blog. And I think it was a poem. It was a writing I did. And
Right.
I called it We Live in Dead Trees.
Mhm.
And I thought of that. And we are more like birds. We live in trees. We
Mm-hmm.
just chop them down and build them different, but we live in trees. And so birds soar through the heavens, they fly and migrate. And yeah, so don't get stuck.
Yeah. It seemed like it felt like graphic design. You had to push so hard for it
Yeah.
to move, right? You felt perhaps unappreciated
Oh,
in
yeah.
that
Yeah.
the work that you know how to do, like the creativity that it takes to be a graphic designer. And so I love that your pivot has also gleaned like this ease, or even perhaps there's like a version of easy that is showing up for you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I would definitely agree with that. I was actually looking around at my life the other day and I was like, I had a little bit of panic because I'm like, did I not pay a bill? Did I not, I've lived for so long in this like fight or flight in this survival mode
Mhm.
that life is just really easy right now. And I'm not taking that for granted at all. I'm very grateful that I'm able to live life in the way that I'm living it right now and following down the paths that I'm feeling that I'm being pushed down. Maybe not pushed, guided. And it's guided by my passion.
I know you have a final piece of advice, a tip. What is it?
It's actually, funnily enough, my podcast for this season is actually called Authenticity.
Mm.
And it's about living authentically in all that you are. And when we fully know and love and trust ourselves, we can show up in the world in a different way. And what I mean by that is when we're born, we are just fully ourselves. And what happens is, a parent or a guardian, or when we're at school, they're like, nope, you can't do that. You can't act like that. You need to sit down and be quiet. And so what happens is we start locking parts of ourselves away through our lives.
Yeah.
And we become adults and we feel a little lost. And we're like, well, shoot, I don't know myself. And so going deep within and asking yourself deep questions and figuring out who you are, you start revealing all those, like we call them shadows. And they're called shadows because there are parts of ourselves that we have hid away because society had deemed that they were unacceptable,
Mhm.
like strong willed, powerful woman during certain times and places, even now, is deemed unacceptable. And so a woman might, or even a man, might put certain parts of themselves away because they're like, oh, rejection. Nope.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to put this away for now. And so
Yeah.
reclaiming all of those parts of yourselves and really looking at it, you get to know yourself more completely and you continue getting to know yourself. And it's so important. And it creates such a like electric flow of love and acceptance and peace within yourself that you're able to navigate through the world authentically, communicate authentically. It all comes down back really all around to the same stuff that we've been talking about. Um, but yeah, and as a tip of advice, I've often I struggled with this when I first started down this path. And I've had friends and family who have said the same things to me, but they're like, well, how do you love yourself? How do you know yourself?
Mm.
And I always counter with, how do you get to know or love somebody else? And the truth, like we spend time with people, we talk to people, we get to know them, we go on dates. And so you have to do those things with yourself. You have to talk to yourself. You have to figure yourself out, figure out what you like, what you don't like. You have a reaction to something, you reflect and you say, wow, that was intense. Why did we respond in this way? Really embrace who you are and love all that you are. Light, dark, good, bad. I don't believe there are really good and bad parts about ourselves. Um, you have to love it all. Um, because you are the one relationship, the only relationship you can never escape. And
Ooh.
so you might as well make it a good one,
May as well make it a good
yeah.
one.
Yeah.
I got nothing else. Amen.
Yeah.
Tell people about what you can offer and where can we find you? Tell us all.
Yeah. So you can follow me on my website, DragonFly Rose, so the bug and the flower.com. And I am trying my hand at launching a kind of like a personal coaching service that's a bit more low key, not like a normal coach, where I help people kind of discover who they are and give them their tool belt. You can also find my photography there. I have a little shop where I create items for mental health or, photography I do that I sell, any herbal things that I do. And you could also follow my blog, The Hippie Gypsy, which is also on my website, Dragonfly Rose. And I do. The Hippie Gypsy is my personal blog where I really I share the deepest parts of myself. And I do that because I know that even if it helps one person to see that they're not alone, that there are things that they can do to make life better, I will do that. I just want everybody to feel the same happiness and love for themselves that I do. I want people to be able to have that.
Yeah. And that directly affects the way that you show up in the world for your business and for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, thank you for joining. This is the Idea to Empire podcast. Be well. All of our links for the podcast will be in the show notes, in the description. You'll be able to find them, I promise. I'm Chanaye Jackson, and that's Anna Marie, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Chanaye.